Welcome back. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. As the pandemic sweeps the world, who can offer critical support to economies? The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, also known as AIIB, believes it has a role to play. The lender is celebrating its 5th anniversary of operations this week. As a multilateral development bank, originally its mission is to improve social and economic conditions in the Asia-Pacific region. 5 years on, with 103 members, it now has a total of 108 approved projects and 46 others in the pipeline, covering 28 economies, including Vietnam, Georgia, Turkey, India, Pakistan, and many more. Half of its projects are in energy and finance. On the occasion of the celebration, I was invited by President Jin Lichun of AIIB. He briefed me about the new priorities for AIIB, namely infrastructure for tomorrow. President Jin, what a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Congratulations on the 5th anniversary. How much do you consider the AIIB over the past 5 years have achieved as the president of it?
I would like to say we have worked together in close collaboration with all of the shareholders, with the board, and in particular, I would like to thank the Chinese government for their supporters, giving such a beautiful, building, and this headquarters is really amazing. And I'm proud of the management team. They worked together seamlessly. I'm proud of the staff. They worked sometimes around the clock, literally, to deliver the lending programs for our countries, particularly over the last year when the whole world was grappling with COVID-19, and our people, our staff, been working very, very hard to deliver $10 billion of the emergent financing to help those countries.
During the crisis, which we are still in the middle of the pandemic, you have something about the crisis management vehicle in the making, crisis recovery vehicle to be exact. Tell me more about how this is likely to be more systematic in a way in the future when you have the infrastructure for tomorrow.
We have done what we did in complying with the Articles Agreement. We have not actually stepped outside the mandate, except that I can say we define our mandate in a broad way, because we are supposed to support investment or financing for infrastructure and other productive sectors. So some people may question the validity of providing money to some of these countries. Sometimes it's called policy lending or budget support to those countries. It's not really for the infrastructure as is understood, right? However, we should understand that under special circumstances, we need to do things extraordinary. It's obvious. You can build a lot of infrastructure, but if there's a weak link, which is social infrastructure, particularly healthcare, how can you make your investment in physical infrastructure productive? It's not possible. So we actually have come to understand the very important association between physical infrastructure and social infrastructure. Now, of course, you see, even in developed countries, the capacity to deal with the COVID-19 cases seems to be really tough. And even in the developed countries, the healthcare system seems to be bursting at its seams. But they still have the ability to deal with the emergency, right? But how about poor countries? So I think we now have reached the consensus that proper balance between physical infrastructure and social infrastructure is important. That will make actual investment in physical infrastructure even more productive.
So you're saying, President Jin, you have reprioritized, reoriented your plan of AIIB from pure physical infrastructure to looking at much more social infrastructure. Is that going to be the result of this pandemic?
You can say for 2020, okay, it is true. Our support is mainly for the countries to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. I think there still would be the need to support these countries, for instance, financing the vaccination of some of these low-income countries. So we still have to allocate resources from the crisis recovery facility to support those countries. We need to import vaccine. And a lot of countries have no capacity to develop vaccines on their own, right? So this is something which we have to do. As I said, we have to take extraordinary measures under extraordinary circumstances. But moving forward, when things go back to normal, we have to go back to our mainstream business, which is the investment in infrastructure and other productive sectors.
Do you see a time frame of that?
It all depends on the effectiveness of safe and effective vaccine. Okay, and I'm optimistic. Probably sometime, maybe in the third quarter, fourth quarter of this year, the supply of vaccine would help a lot of countries to go back, relatively speaking, to normalcy. Right? It could not be the same as pre-COVID-19 days, but to a great extent, we can go back to normal business, normal life. And then it would be possible for us to refocus back onto the mainstream business of infrastructure investment.
Some have invented the terminology of so-called vaccine diplomacy. Is AIIB trying to exercise also, quote-unquote, the vaccine diplomacy?
You know, we are not diplomats. We are development practitioners. It is very much important for us to support those countries who need financing, such as building up the basic healthcare systems to deal with the emergency of taking care of the people suffering from the COVID-19. And also, of course, vaccination is very much important. This is what has to be done. It's not politics. It's the real work to protect the lives of the people. And whatever people may call it, and I think we just have to do it, right? For a good reason.
Yes, indeed, President Jin. The other issue is I see the transformation taking place at AIIB's agenda, which is not just to focus on hard infrastructure, but also more internet-based infrastructure. Possibly it has something to do with what's going on here in the pandemic, exacerbated that trend in the world. But how do you look at this transformation? Do you have enough expertise for that?
You see, I think the infrastructure should be defined in a way which would most effectively meet the needs of the modern world. Okay, so when we define infrastructure, it should not be done in a very narrow sense. When we started to set up this new bank, what we envisioned, what we saw, was the need to enhance investment in infrastructure, which would pave the path for long-term sustainable development. But we also were aware of the need to support the other sectors like manufacturing, service sector, including education and health. We put them into the other productive sectors. And then over the last 5 years, you see such kind of great advancement in science and technology, particularly in the AI, ICT. Yeah. So definitely we need to put money in these critical areas. However, I have to point it out, it's not right to separate traditional infrastructure from the digital infrastructure. They actually come together. For instance, you can use new technology to improve the quality of infrastructure development. you can make the financing more cost effective. And the infrastructure built with a new technology could be serving the society better. So I would say the new technology would permeate the traditional infrastructure sector rather than separate them. Oh, this is traditional infrastructure. This is new digital infrastructure. It's not. They are working together.
President Jin, debt is a big problem for all of us today, particularly exacerbated by the crisis of the pandemic. You see economies around the world suffering, growth of the world economy going much lower since the Second World War. So, Mr. President, in one of your mandates, you've been suggesting to provide financial support to countries while at the same time not to exacerbate their debt sustainability. Tell me more about how you're likely to do that, particularly under the current circumstances.
You see, debt problem is definitely an issue. And ever since I was involved in the multilateral development business 4 decades ago, over the last 4 decades, we've been talking about reducing public debt, dealing with debt crisis, and how to deal with debt overhang, all these kind of things, over the last 4 decades. To a certain extent, some of the debt problems seems to have eased. On the other hand, some other countries' debt burden has increased. I would say some Asian countries are doing pretty well, right? So we should not be inhibited by the debt problems in continuing our efforts to support those countries by giving them a loan, by giving them money. The question is how? How should we finance their development without building up pressure on their public balance sheets? A couple of things we can do. Okay. To improve the quality and effectiveness of the infrastructure projects. To have a very good development program, financing the most essential infrastructure facilities in a sequential manner without creating white elephants. I think it's important to deal with corruption because quite a lot of monies, in some cases, was siphoned off to the private pocket. So in some cases, they end up having bad infrastructure projects, low quality. And third is to mobilize the private sector investment to reduce the pressure on the government. So by working together, we want to make sure the investment in infrastructure will be corruption-free. It will not lead to white elephants. And we want to make sure, working together, we create essential infrastructures for long-term development. And we involve the private sector to finance all those most important facilities.
Mr. President, tell me more about your funding. The funding of AIIB, now at the most difficult time for all economies around the world, China included, which is also one of your founding members. How much do you think governments and entities will be able to still contribute to a beautiful project and blueprint you just painted?
I think, first of all, crisis has made people and the government fully aware of the importance of good, high-quality projects. This is not the time to be negligible about the use of the resources. This is not the time just to put money anywhere, right? And this is also the time for us to take stock of the development experience, where things went wrong, where things did well. So even though we were locked down, even though we had to go virtual, even though we don't have the boots on the ground when we finance some of the projects, we tried our very best to have very good due diligence, working closely with our counterparts in all those countries. In China, of course, it's easier. So I'm pretty sure that in spite of the very tough conditions, the projects we finance will be doing very well.
But now here's the thing. International governance, when AIIB just started, was very much respected. Now international global governance, shall I say, is facing one of its biggest challenging times in history. So, President Jin, how much cooperation can we expect among these multilateral lending institutions?
You see, I would say the COVID-19 crisis would help people to understand how important it is for all of the countries, for all of the peoples in this world to work together. While social distancing is required, while international flights of the airlines have been reduced, this, in my view, has not led people to think that from now on we can separate from each other. No, indeed, people become acutely aware of the importance that we need to stay together, work together, certainly in a very different way, right? So multilateralism would be further enhanced by the COVID-19 crisis, not the other way around. I think people, particularly those in those poor countries, would appreciate the support the World Bank, AIIB, and ours would give them in dealing with the containment of the COVID-19. And with regard to global production chain, definitely we need to restore it, and we need to fix the problems. Now, if there's some disruption in the global production chain, the best way, the solution, is to see how this is going to be fixed. Why this has happened? What is the best way to prepare for some emergency? Rather than coming to the wrong conclusion, since there's disruption, okay, you do it on your way, I do it in my way, we don't have cross-border investment, we don't have trade, we don't have this kind of thing. That's the recipe for disaster, right?
As the president of a rising multilateral financial institution, what do you make of the role of geopolitics these days in our world? How much do you have to think about it in your everyday work? How much do you have to think about it when you're communicating with your members?
You know, the bank is apolitical. Okay, the basic principle is that the development bank or multilateral development bank should not be involved in the politics and disputes between any of their members, because getting involved would exacerbate the problems, not helping them solve the problems. So this is very much important. On the other hand, we have to be politically sensitive, to be apolitical, which means we should know what kind of things we cannot do, what kind of things we cannot say. So for us, certainly, it's important to maintain, stay the course of being apolitical, non-political. But in dealing with the practical issues, I think we are trying to do our very best to help the people to think about cooperation rather than hostility, antagonism, and we help people to look long-term, beyond the immediate issues they were dealing with.
Thank you, President Jin.
Thank
As
you,
always, all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
My in-depth interview with Jin Lichun, the president of AIIB. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, catch us on World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. And bye for now.